Greetings, everyone. Tonight will be a very special evening, as this is a thank you video to you, the audience, for getting back to ashes, well over 1,000 subs, and we are continuing to grow. With that being said, I would like to give a very huge special thank you to Inner Scare and Inner Scare Wifey, for without them this channel would not exist. And, as a big surprise, they are my two special guests tonight. The stories will start out with Inner Scare first and then Inner Scare Wifey. Afterwards, I will read on for the remainder of the video. For everyone that asked, I tried to get as many stories as you requested. So tuck in, get warm, because there is a lot. With that being said, before we get started, I promised every one of you that I would give birthday shout outs. These are the people that left comments of their birthdays. I will run through them very quickly. Please forgive me if I mispronounce anyone's name. El Delore on January 15th. E. Jones, January 17th. Kimberly Shepard, January 26th. Minnie Miller, January 27th. Rebecca Rich, January 4th. Robin, January 5th. Tanya Miller, January 27th. Misty McLaughlin, January 28th. And for the future birthdays that wish to have a shout out on this video, Bridget Brown, February 8th, and Charlix, all the way from Scotland, February 27th. Happy belated birthday to you all, and happy birthday to Bridget Brown and Charlix in the future. I wish you all a very happy birthday, and I hope it was everything you dreamed of. For anyone else with birthdays coming up, please leave it in the comment of this video, and you will be featured in the next video. Now, tuck in, get warm, and let's prepare for this special edition thank you video to all of you. After all stories are done, I will leave another hour or two with just pure rain so that you can enjoy your sleep. Alrighty, it is time to return back to ashes. For when we return to the ashes, we will arise a stronger, happier, and better person in the morning. Let's get started, shall we? Disclaimer: these stories are not in any particular order.
So to kill time during the shutdown of COVID-19, my siblings and I would go for drives or smoke weed. At the time, I was 22, sister 20, brother 17. We had nothing better to do one night, so we roll a blunt, drive to a nice park we live near, smoke it, and drive around the neighborhood. We live in a quiet neighborhood in a slightly dangerous city. Our neighborhood has had things ranging from murders to car robberies. Mine 4 times. We never felt unsafe though. So we're driving down our tiny street, and in the distance we see a guy near our house. We think, oh, someone getting exercise, good for them. So, mind you peak COVID, I don't want a stranger blocking my way to my driveway. This guy is covered in blood. His face is smashed up, and his white Ed Hardy t-shirt is stained red. It was so hard to look at. So he gets in front of my guy, and I freeze, and he asks me to roll down my window. Why I did it? I don't know, okay? I'm naive and wanted to help if I could. So I crack my window. He tells me he was just assaulted by a group of men. I'm like, oh gosh, do you want me to call 911? He refuses and tell me people are after him. He asks me to drive him to the homeless shelter in downtown, and obviously I say no. It's COVID, I don't know you, but I can get you help. He tries getting in my car. He's now yelling, don't call the cops. I got attacked by a group of black teens. And he keeps yelling that. The only black children in my neighborhood are middle school age who play basketball and dance to my car radio when I drive by, so I know he's lying. He tries getting into the back seat where my brother is. Obviously, I locked my car doors when we approached him. Now I'm suspicious and freak out in reverse, skirt around him and drive down our street and pull off. I circle around to go back home. I assumed he'd be walking away and I could get in. He's now speed walking back and forth near my house. So I turn around again. I forgot to add we called our mom, who was at home at the time. She was freaked out too when she looked out the window, but didn't want to call the cops and have to deal with the whole situation. She said he was definitely on drugs and his beatdown was due to drug money, she bets. We go back the third time and he's walking away, and far enough I can get into my driveway. My dad's friend, who lives 3 houses down, went down to check it out. The guy was walking towards the highway we live off of and was still acting crazy. Blood coming out of his mouth while he's talking, my dad's friend said. Never saw him again, but I was a little scared. I know this isn't super creepy, but I hated the fact it happened in front of my house and not one neighbor peeked out to see what was going on. I thought about the bloody guy a lot when I'd pull up to my house at nighttime. I'd be nervous he'd pop up on me. I got mace after this incident. I know people are like, why wouldn't you call the cops? Well, first, the cops are usually busy, and this is a non-emergency. It would be considered a non-emergency because the guy was alert, walking around, conscious and clearly on something. They would have taken their sweet-ass time. It's a thing in my city. When a girl was murdered, the police refused entry into the house until 24 hours later. The family was able to ping her phone in the house and knew she was there. Second, he did not want me calling 911. I don't know how many times I have to say it. I'm assuming he was A, on drugs, B, had a beatdown due to owing money or taking drugs, or C, he got into the wrong crowd. He was a grown man, maybe 45 plus years old. He wanted me to bring him to a homeless shelter, so he probably doesn't have insurance. And he might have already had run-ins with the police.
A creepy ghost encounter I had with my roommate. Let me set up the scene. My roommate and I decided to visit my mom a couple days ago. I know this guy really well and we're really great friends even to this day. When we visited, we stayed in my room, which has a window that can directly look into my mom's living room. We did the usual thing and stayed up talking, listening to music, and had a great time. At about 1:30 a.m., we decided it was time to turn in. I had my 2 dogs sleeping with us at our feet. For some reason, I wasn't able to sleep. I felt kind of weird, but I chalked it up to just being awake late and traveling. At around 2 a.m., my oldest dog suddenly sits up, stiffens, and stares at the window that looks directly into the living room. I noticed that body position right away because he usually does that when he's frightened or sees somebody new. Except he isn't barking like he usually did. He was stiff but shaking in a way that made me feel worried. My other dog notices and gets up and looks out the window too. Her ears go up and she becomes frozen, almost like a statue. I feel scared at this point, but I'm not sure why. Something felt really off at this point. My roommate gets up, and when he looks out the window, I see his eyes have become wider than I have ever seen them before. I don't have my glasses on and it's dark, so I can't see anything. My roommate is frozen, looking out into the window. I ask, "What is it? Why is everybody looking out there?" My roommate is only able to make a scared mutter. I ask again, but louder with more urgency. He looks at me and says with a quiet voice, "You don't want to know." I then ask, "Is somebody in the house? Do I call 911? I then quickly remember setting the alarm to the house, which has motion sensors. There are door and window alarms. My dogs are still stiff with fear, and my roommate looks back out the window. He tells me, "It's not human." At that point, I was freaking out, and I run to the window as fast as I could with my eyes shut. I slam the blinds down and turn on the lights. My dogs and my roommate were still staring at the window. I asked him what he saw. He told me that there was a pale old man staring into the window right at us. I asked him to describe the man, and he perfectly described my dead grandfather of 9 months. He had never seen my grandfather. He hated pictures, and I never had any around. After about 30 minutes of sheer panic, we decided to open the blinds again, because why not? The man was gone. We did not sleep for the rest of the night.
This has always been in my memory, and I always just thought I was a kid, so I must have just made it up. But today, a conversation with my brother revealed that it wasn't my imagination. When I was about 6 or 7 years old, my mom, my 2 brothers, and I lived in this house. I vividly, so vividly, remember waking up in the middle of the night to the taps in the bathroom being on full. Not dripping, but going as fast as they can. Being 6 years old and not thinking anything of it, really, I would hear it and get up and turn the taps off calmly and then go back to bed. This wasn't just once. It was every night. I also remember waking up to a dark figure standing at the end of the bed. This scared me, and I remember hiding under the covers until morning, not wanting him to see me. In the morning, I told my mom that I didn't like the dark man in my room. Not long after this incident, we moved. Today, when I was talking to my brother, he said, "Remember that house in town?" I said, "Oh yeah, the haunted one." He said, "Oh yes, remember the taps?" I was kind of taken aback because yes, of course I remember the taps, but it wasn't just me. I have mentioned it to my mom over the years, and she always has said, yeah, that was a bad house. But now, it makes it sort of real that my brother, who would have been about 9 or so, remembered the taps as well. I mentioned it to Mom. I said he remembered the taps too. She was surprised because he never mentioned it to her. She said, "What else do you remember?" I said I remembered the dark figure. She also remembered me getting up in the morning and telling her about it. That was the reason we moved. I guess my question is, what could this be? A harmful spirit? Demon? Bad plumbing? Or a vivid imagination? We moved into our house about 7 years ago. Since we've been there, several things have happened that make me think we're not alone here. This is one of the first. I was in the basement one day, digging through a closet to get to a tackle box for some fishing hooks. Our house is a split level, so the basement is only half underground, and enough light comes through the windows during the day that I normally don't turn on the lights when I go down there. I found the hooks I was looking for and set them on a table by the closet. As I was putting the tackle box back, I must have caught the edge of the hook box and it fell to the floor, spilling everywhere. I bent over to start picking them up, and just as I did, the light in the basement turned on. At first, I didn't think it was paranormal. I thought my husband had come home from work. It was close to the time he was expected. I thought he must have come home, found me downstairs and saw me spill the hooks, so he turned on the light to help me see better. I even said thanks to him. When I heard no response, I called his name, and still, there was no response. I went to investigate, and he wasn't home. I was home alone with my dog. That light has never turned on before or since. The switch was flipped up, so something moved the switch to turn it on. The doors were still all closed and locked. I still don't know what caused the light to come on. Since then, a bunch of other things have happened. One time I was upstairs cleaning. We have one of those Electrolux vacuums that isn't a normal upright vacuum. I don't know what the term is for them. It has a large button that has to be pushed in order for it to turn on. And once the main unit is on, there's a switch on the sweeper part that has to be turned on to start the rollers. I had just gotten done sweeping the stairs and I turned it off, but left the vacuum in the living room still plugged in because that was the next room to be done. I went down the hall to switch the laundry and hear the vacuum start up. The dog was with me and we both turned to look at the vacuum at the same time. It was visible from the hall where we were. There was nothing there, but the vacuum was on and running. It's never turned on before by itself and hasn't since. One time, my husband was home with me and I saw a figure. We had just gotten home from getting groceries. and the plan was for me to get food and water for the dog bowls, and he was going to take some of the groceries to the basement. We keep our dog food canister in the basement in a little closet under the stairs, different closet than the hooks. I went down to get the dog food and I saw what I thought was my husband come down the stairs out of the peripheral vision. It came down the stairs, stood behind me for a second, then went towards where we keep the canned food and pop in the basement. I got the food, then asked my husband, who I thought had just come downstairs, if there was more to bring down. There was no response. I asked again, thinking I just didn't hear him. Again, no response. I go around the corner to where it went, and there was nothing there. I was alone in that basement. I take the dog food upstairs and find my husband, who was in the complete opposite end of the house. I ask him about being downstairs. He hadn't even walked downstairs yet. Here's the kicker. My husband does not believe in ghosts, spirits, or the paranormal. He always dismissed it and acted like I was crazy anytime something happened. Until this happened. He was home alone, other than the dog. And I was on the phone with him because I just left work and had called to see if he needed anything. He was in the middle of a sentence and he just went silent. It scared me because I thought something happened to him. Then he tells me, "Hold on, someone's here." I thought that was strange because I didn't hear the dog bark. He comes back on the line and says, "I'm going to have to call you right back. I just saw someone at the door and I don't know where they went." I wait for the call back. He calls back. He went outside, checked the perimeter of the house, the outbuildings, the garage. Nothing. He swears he saw someone in a flannel shirt walking around the door, but there was no one there. We live in the middle of nowhere. Our closest neighbors are miles away, and there's nowhere someone could have hid as fast or easily as they did if it was a real person out there. The dog never acted like he saw anything at all. I occasionally smell cigarette smoke in one corner of the basement. It's the only place in the house I've smelt it. We don't smoke, so it's pretty noticeable when I smell it, and I never see any smoke. I've noticed a lot of other strange things in the house, but have always been able to debunk them as other things. And I actually thought I might have been going crazy, seeing things, until my husband saw it too. He now believes everything I've said and seen. The house isn't that old. It was built in the 70s. We bought it from his family and no one has passed away here that we're aware of, but there was a much older house on the property at one time that was demolished when this one was built. As a side note, I do not have normal hearing. I'm actually deaf on one side with normal hearing on the other. So it's normal for him to come home and be in the house without me hearing it, depending on which direction I'm facing and where I'm at in the house. It's part of the reason we got the dog. The dog alerts me when anyone comes down the driveway. I always keep the doors locked when I'm home alone. Do you think it's haunted, or am I going crazy? So I live in a relatively big house with my family and mother-in-law. The house is my wife's family home, and in which her father passed away about 9 years ago. For a while now, I've been seeing things out of the corner of my eye, which sounds like a cliche, but with how much it happens, I'm starting to really suspect they're not normal. Figures or orbs moving across doorways, and what happened this morning has got me questioning more than ever. So this morning, my daughter, who was 4, as she always does, woke up at about 7 a.m. As I work nights, 7 a.m. feels like 4 a.m. to me. So to get me through another 30 minutes in bed, my daughter has a tablet she can play educational games on, etc. This was charging in the dining room, which is about a 60-foot walk from the bedroom, so I dragged myself downstairs to get it. I got the tablet, and as I was walking out of the large room, a music box on the dining table started to play Silent Night. About half of the song in total. Having daughters, I know music boxes can get caught on the last couple of notes. But when this music box played half of the song, it really surprised me. The only other thing to note was that I always thought this kind of encounter would make me run a mile screaming, but I felt so calm and almost at ease. I'm guessing this was a kind spirit. I am 25. I live in Utah, and I'm curious if any of you have seen anything like this before. I'm pretty sure I saw a Wendigo or a skinwalker. I know it sounds strange or crazy. I don't really believe in those things, and I'm regularly skeptical when it comes to the paranormal. This happened to me when I was 17 and in high school and living with my parents. My house at the time was in a very small town. The backyard faced open, empty fields and mountains for miles before you reached another civilization at all. My best friend lived next door and shared this field as our backyard in a way. I have to explain that his house set was built on a different street that ended in the field with a small cul-de-sac. I think there was supposed to be more houses built down the street to expand the town, but they clearly never got around to it. So, his driveway was basically in the cul-de-sac, even though no other houses were built there. This matters later in the story. I used to stay the night at my friend's house a lot in high school because I didn't have the best relationship with my parents. Every once in a while, we would wake up to hear dragging and a weird gargling sound from the back porch. His room was a basement room with a window and overlooking the back porch. It would happen maybe a couple times a month, but whenever we would gather the courage to check, nothing would be back there. This happened for years. One night haunts my friend and I to this day. My friend was getting ready to move, and we would stay up all night, playing games and watching movies. We decided to go on a music drive to just vibe. So we hopped in his truck with high beams and swung out of the driveway, turning them on towards the field to use the roundabout. The light illuminated this thing. It looked like a person, but it wasn't. It was naked on all fours, abnormally large, particularly its limbs that seemed to fold under itself in an unnatural way. Its pale skin clung to it like it had been stretched onto it. But the part that still sends shivers down my spine is its face. Its jaw hung open to this gaping black maw, like a snake unhinging its jaw to eat. Its black eyes glistening in the light as it looked at us. But just as it turned to see us, it quickly scurried backwards, almost like it was on rewind into the brush of the field. My friend and I were pale as ghosts. We both looked at each other like, "Did you see that too?" We were shaken. Let's just say we tried to have a good rest of the night, but we couldn't believe what we saw. We ended up just sitting there in his basement, with guns ready and waiting to hear the gargling and dragging again. But we never did. Sorry that it's not very climactic, but it's the truth. I now don't live in that town anymore. There are times when I visit there, though. That empty field still feels like it's watching and waiting. Even though I can't see it, I can still feel like it's out there. I have two identical events that have occurred, and I've never figured out how to explain it. Years ago, I remember casually walking through the basement of my home as a teen and passing my little sister, who I'm going to call M, who was probably 12 at the time. As I made my way around a corner to the stairs, I passed my same little sister M running from the main floor down the stairs. I immediately stopped her and asked what had happened because I had just passed her in another room 30 seconds ago. She was confused, and I decided not to mess with what had just happened because it spooked me. For reference, this home is located in southern Idaho, about 20 minutes from the Shoshone Fort Hall Reservation. I never looked into that 30 seconds that I couldn't wrap my mind around. However, a year or so later, my family was on a camping trip in western Wyoming. I'm walking with my older sister past the crafting lodge and watch my little sister M run in. We walk for a half mile or so down the only trail that crosses the campsite to the bathrooms. As we reach it, we see M run out of the bathroom. My older sister stops me and is freaked out because M had just been in a craft lodge half a mile away, and it would have been impossible for M to cross the campsite without us seeing her. I was mainly freaked out because this time it had been pointed out by someone else. I still don't know if it means anything, but I thought people here might know or have similar experiences. Okay, I totally understand if no one believes this, because we are still unsure of what the F happened. But we sat down and came to a consensus on the events, and all agreed we witnessed the same thing. Me and 3 buddies were hiking Thursday and Friday in SBNF, various trails, mostly the known ones, and mostly during the day. Friday, we were making our way to Clark Summit. As we were walking, one by one, we noticed that we were veering off the trail. I asked my friend in front of me why he was going off the trail, and he asked our friend who was in front of him the same thing. The friend in front told us, "I can hear a woman talking. You guys don't hear that?" We didn't hear anything. We tried to convince her to leave it be, but it was already kind of dark, and we were close to where we wanted to set up camp on the trail. The friend in front is female, and insisted that what she heard sounded like a female calling for help, and that she sounded really close. So I think she felt inclined to investigate a possible female in distress, while we were totally okay with going about our business. Okay, I got a bit spooked now, because she's absolutely serious, and we absolutely could not hear whatever she was hearing. Here's where it got weird. We only ventured off the trail about 300 to 400 meters, yet at one point, we were completely lost. We don't have any fancy gear or GPS stuff because we've never needed it, but we've been on this trail enough to know we hadn't gone far. Yet, we couldn't find the trail in any direction after walking for about 15 to 20 minutes. I started to feel weird, kind of dizzy and lightheaded, and when I mentioned this, the other 2 said they felt weird as well. It was like something had changed the environment around us, or moved us somehow to another location. I had no idea which way to go, and now it was fully dark. My female friend said the woman's voice had said, "I'm over here," and "Please, help me." She said it sounded like she was hurt and crying. So here we are, somehow lost, after only walking for about 20 minutes off a large trail because my friend is hearing voices. We decided to stop walking in any direction because the last thing you want to do at night is get even more lost. We had 2 tents and sleeping bags in our packs, so we found a clearing and set up. We figured once the sun was out, we'd easily find our way back to the trail. Before we could even lay down to rest, I noticed a tree near us was moving as if something was climbing it. It was really dark, and I wear glasses, so I really struggled to see. So I called them over to take a look. I thought it was an animal at first, but it wasn't an animal. It wasn't anything. I could see the outline of what roughly looked like a human shape, but it was transparent, like completely see-through. The best way I can describe it is the way heat waves look on the pavement in the summer. You know, the wavy and liquid effect? They saw it too. My male buddy said, "What the F are we looking at?" when he finally spotted it. They all said the same thing. It was transparent, but still visible due to the foliage around it, being displaced and moving as it moved. We all just stood stone still, whispering theories back and forth as to what we thought we were seeing. I thought maybe it was some kind of optical illusion, but they both immediately jumped to aliens, of course. The thing just sat there, perched on a large branch, about 50 feet up. It's like it was watching us watch it. The other oddity is that after staring at this thing for about 10 minutes, we noticed all the normal forest sounds we heard prior had stopped completely. I mean, the only noise was us talking and the leaves under our feet. The hairs on my neck stood up, and I had goosebumps all over when I realized this, like something was truly wrong. After about 10 minutes of us standing there, whatever this thing was started to climb up the tree even more, until we could no longer see it at all. We approached the base of the tree slowly and walked around in a circle with our necks craned up, trying to see this thing. It was too dark, and the trees were too close for us to see the top. We didn't hear it jump to another tree, so we assumed it was still up there. We were all too spooked, obviously, to camp right underneath whatever this was. So we gathered our stuff and started walking towards the moon. I kid you not, after about 5 minutes of walking, we were back on the trail. I literally dropped my bag and said, "What the F?" out loud. We all stood there confused, looking around trying to confirm what we were seeing. My buddy likes to joke and said maybe we walked through some hallucinogenic spores and had imagined all of it. I highly doubt that, but whatever happened, it seemed kind of, I guess, predatory. Like it seems like something was luring us or trying to confuse us. My friend still thinks we were effing with her about not hearing the woman she claimed to hear. Was it that thing we saw imitating a woman? How did we get lost so close to the trail? This was easily the weirdest thing I've ever experienced in the wilderness. We still don't have a good theory as to what we saw. It may not have been an alien, but whatever it was humanoid and was 100% transparent. Somehow, and able to climb a really large tree with ease, without making much noise. I would love to hear any theories about what this may have been. Has anyone else seen anything like this in the woods? Side note, I feel I should mention there were no drugs consumed. A few years ago, about 2019, I was riding the bus one night to get home. There was a guy on the bus that was a little disheveled and dirty, reeked of alcohol and generally acting weird. I was sitting in the back and he sat near me and tried to talk to me. I was polite at first. I ride the bus at night a lot, so a drunk homeless guy does not bother me, and I have no problem making small talk with a stranger on the bus. Plus, I'm used to there being one or two sketchy people on the bus considering the route, and the fact it's late at night. When he tried to get flirty, I politely told him I wasn't interested and put my headphones back in my ears and ignored him. He got a little frustrated and even said some vulgar things, but I couldn't really hear him, so it was fine. It's not my first rodeo being in that kind of situation. And while it is uncomfortable, and there's nothing okay about that sort of behavior, I rarely feel threatened. Most of the time, they are harmless. All bark and no bite. And I'm a big girl, as in tall and overweight. And I know basic self-defense, and always have an exit strategy when in scenarios where I don't feel safe. When people get like that on the bus, I find most of the time ignoring them and acting like I'm not fazed is enough for them to get bored and find something else to do. I only engage if they get in my face or start harassing other passengers, especially other women, kids, and seniors, or anyone who appears vulnerable, because I will not tolerate that. And the bus drivers usually don't put up with that either, if it escalates enough. Anyway, this random drunk homeless guy would have been just one of many random drunk homeless guys if it weren't for what happened next. So my stop is coming up. I'm looking forward to going home. I'm exhausted and so ready to get to bed. I pull the cord to indicate that I want off on the next stop, and he gets up and walks up to the front to talk to the driver and then laughs loudly. I don't think much of it, except I'm a little wary and thinking, please don't tell me we're getting off at the same stop. As the bus slows down, I am waiting at the back door to be let off at my stop. Instead of opening the back door, he opens the front door and the guy gets off. I ask the driver to open the back door, and I see him shake his head in the mirror, and annoyed, I walk to the front to get off there, but he closes the door before I can get off and starts driving. Angry, I say, "What the hell? That's my stop." And the driver replies, "Sorry, but I can't in good conscience let you off at the same stop as that guy. Either get off at the next one or wait until we get to a transit station and take a bus going the other way." Not getting it, I ask, "Why?" "Because of what he said to me," he says. I ask what he said, and the driver just says, "Nothing I would like to repeat, ever. I am so sorry, but just trust me." The driver actually looked shaken, and considering the tone of his voice and the look on his face, as frustrated and anxious as I was to get home, I trusted him and took his word for it. I caught another bus going the other way at the next terminal and watched the driver radio dispatch to get some peace officers and transit security to patrol the area near that stop. They were parked in the parking lot near the stop when I finally got off, and I was extra paranoid and on high alert as I walked the couple of blocks to my apartment that night. Fortunately, without further incident. I never saw that guy again, and I'm okay with that. To this day, I wonder what exactly he said to the driver. It bugs me not knowing, but at the same time, maybe it's better that way. Either way, the implications are enough to have freaked me out. English is not my first language, so please bear with me. Okay. 2 years ago, when I was 19, I stayed with my father for quarantine so I could take my online classes and etc. My father and uncle started seeing some friends Thursday nights to talk and socialize. But long story short, my dad has gun permission, and he taught me how to use it in case of an emergency. I'm from a rural area. so this is important for the story. One week, they broke into an uncle's warehouse that is in the back of the principal's house. To make a mental map, between the warehouse and the house, there is a land where my uncle usually parks his truck. This is important. That Thursday night, almost a week after the robbery incident, my dad prepared for his night out, and I was pretty nervous. But I knew it was a way for him to distress, so I just tell him that, please be home early. 2 hours later, my uncle calls me and tells me he left the truck unlocked and the keys are inside in the co-pilot seat. I accept the duty of going outside at midnight with no other light than my phone. Because the new moon was out, and for security, I decided to take the gun with me. I didn't think about using it on a person, but an animal, feral dogs are pretty dangerous here, and I have been attacked by one before. I walk to the truck, and like 10 meters before reaching it, I hear it. Heavy footsteps. Not an animal for sure, at least not a dog. I ran as fast as I can, opened the truck, and in total desperation, pointed to the sound and shot. I hear it dropping on the ground, but no sound, like an animal or human in pain. Just nothing. I enter the truck and lock myself in and roll the window down, only the minimum to hear anything. I called my dad, crying, telling him I shot something or someone. He told me to turn the car headlights on and try to see what I shot. I did it, and also I point at my phone light because the truck is parallel to the place I shot. Nothing. I can't even see where it dropped. The land has large grass enough to see sinking if something is there. My dad arrived some minutes later. He even tried to look for blood, anything, but we didn't see anything. It's not the first weird experience in that house, but it's the creepiest one. Now I can laugh at that weird experience and my uncle's jokes that I shot a ghost. I was 21 and had just moved into my own apartment from the college dorm. It was a new construction. I was living alone and had just started settling in. Something in my house felt weird though. I'd sleep in my bedroom, but hear noises come from the living room. I'd hear the bathroom door open and close. I'm a chicken. I just closed my eyes shut and slept. I went away on a week-long trip and came back to my apartment being completely flooded. I chalked it off to the window being left open and the rainwater getting in. I went to live with a friend after cleaning up. I came back after 3 days and I found massive handprints on my mirror and on my walls. I'm 5'2". My hands are tiny. I could in no way have accidentally reached the parts of that mirror and the wall the prints were on. I was spooked. A couple of months later, things began to escalate. Like I'd be sweeping the floor in my bedroom and notice somebody walking in the living room. Or I'd be hanging with friends and they'd hear somebody come into my apartment or hear a voice, but nobody would be there. The security guard got a puppy one day. He was friendly and loved me. I've hung out with him downstairs. He's also known to walk into people's apartments. For some reason, he refused to enter mine. When I picked him up and brought him in, he was visibly shivering and started to cry. I immediately dropped him out to the threshold of my apartment and he seemed to calm down. I obtained plants, but they all died. Eventually, I ended up moving out, but I could never understand what was happening in that apartment. This happened a few months ago and has been bugging me. I was out hiking and rappelling with a friend in the hills near Tombstone. I want to mention that I have spent quite a bit of time solo hiking and camping. I am used to hearing noises and brushing it off. Anyways, it's late afternoon and I'm the first one to rappel down. I got to the bottom, and while my partner was getting ready to follow, we heard this noise that I would describe most like a growl or snarl. It sounded like it was coming from the ridge above both of us. If facing the cliff, it sounded like it was coming from the right side. We both looked around, but I didn't see anything. I encouraged him to come down and even half joked that it was probably just a bear or mountain lion. At that point, I wasn't even feeling that nervous. I figured that once the two of us were together again, we would be pretty intimidating to an animal. While he rappelled down, I heard a loud crash to what seemed to be parallel to me on the left. By this point, I'm starting to get pretty scared because it was getting closer, and also had somehow gone from right to left on an exposed cliff face without either of us seeing it. He successfully rappelled down, and we both agreed we needed to get the F out of there, and we still had a steep downhill climb to the car. We packed up the gear as fast as possible. As we get our packs back on, we heard what to me sounded like a howler monkey. The noise was close, and we still could not see what was making it. Of course, it was from the direction that we needed to go. We hauled ass down the mountain and got in the car. I know that it can be easy to let the mind play tricks, but we had the exact same account of what happened. Now, this is the part I hesitate to put in writing because I know it sounds even more insane, but we both heard whispering and giggling as if it was right next to us. I keep trying to explain to myself that our minds just played a trick. The first noise I would chalk up to a bear or mountain lion. Animals are stealthy and could run in front of us without us noticing. Something else could have fell from the right side? What made the monkey noises though? Why do we both feel like we heard whispering? Anyone else have creepy experiences in Arizona? I want to believe someone was pranking us, but there weren't any other cars in the parking area. My friend believes that we experienced something supernatural. I honestly have no idea what to think. So, this happened on Saturday. I'm a 29-year-old female and live in a decent neighborhood. Not the best, but definitely not one usually thought of as super dangerous. It wasn't even that late, like 9:30 p.m., and it is summer in my country, so it'd been dark for an hour or two at most. I left my friend taking transport back home, and since my friend had left in a rush, there was a thing I wanted to tell that I felt I would forget once I was home, but I got my phone taken from my hands a few months ago, so I was waiting until I was in a safe place to take it out. So I turn a corner. There's literally 1 block to my house, and this is a pretty small street. I thought I was safe, and suddenly, someone talks to me. His words are slurred, so I didn't quite get what he said, and it was dark. But after a moment, I understood he was telling me to give him my phone or my wallet or something. I stared, and despite the darkness, I saw something in his hand, which he was holding very much like a gun. I think it may have been fake, but still, I was terrified. For some reason, I looked around, and not so far away, walking towards me, was another woman. I screamed for help and ran away from the man, all the while bracing myself for the pain in case the gun wasn't fake. The woman yelled at me to stop running and to get inside of the building closest to us. We both did. There, after having a panic attack, the woman told me the man had been next to a car that I didn't see because I was so fixated on the possible gun. I doubt the man wanted anything other than my phone, but still, the fact was he had a quick and easy escape, and that there is a possibility that I could have lost more than just my cell phone. To that man, let's never meet again. To the woman and her friend who walked me that block home, and also to the doorwoman that gave me water when I was panicking, I'm sorry I didn't ask your names or properly thank you, but you guys are my hero. One night, me and my coworkers decided to play with a Ouija board outside of work. We talked to a girl named Quinn who said she was a demon. She seemed pretty cool till towards the end of talking to her, we decided we needed to head home because it was like 2 a.m. But she wouldn't let us say goodbye until we promised that if we ever used the Ouija board again, that we would talk to her. About a week later, the place where we worked caught on fire. So, a few days after that, we go to the lake and use the Ouija board again and ask for Quinn. We asked if she started the fire, and she told us that she did. Then, it seemed like Quinn got scared or overpowered because the board started acting up. It spelled Zozo and started counting backwards. We quickly said goodbye and moved the planchette to goodbye. About 2 weeks later, I was driving to my friend's house. I should mention that the friend was a girl I was seeing at the time, and she was cheating and using me. I did not know this at the time. I guess Quinn knew because she seemed mad, protecting and jealous when me and my friends mentioned this girl's name the first time we used the Ouija board. So, on the way to our house, I hydroplaned and flipped my truck. I have to add the Ouija board is in the truck. Some people driving down the road stopped to help get the door open, and I climbed up and out. When the cops arrived, they made sure I was okay and said that they had to write me a ticket just because of the accident. I don't have the ticket anymore because this happened about 4 years ago, but the address site of the accident was Route 666, Virginia. This is not the most shocking or lengthy story, but it's creepy enough to me nonetheless. When I was 18, there was a gas station outside of town. This rinky-dink little place where the cashier sells cigarettes to you if you were in pull-ups and being carried by your mom. They just didn't care. I pulled up one day and walked out with a pack of Marlboros and a Red Bull for some gaming time, because I was itching to die young and fast. I got in my car and turned it on. For some context, I weighed about 108 pounds and was 5'4". Yeah, I know, I'm tiny. I was a scrawny teenager in a sketchy-ass gas station parking lot, but in the middle of the day, mind you. Anyway, I always keep my car doors locked. As soon as I'm in my car, first thing I do, besides check the back seat before I even get in, is lock my doors. I do that, and a split second later, I hear my passenger side door jiggling. This guy, in his late 20s to 30s, blonde hair, stubble, normal looking dude, was yanking on my door handle like he knew me, like I was his effing Uber. I'd never seen him before, and this man had no business trying to get into my daggone car. I'm just in shock and watch as he taps my window and points down like he wants me to unlock it or roll down my window. I could tell he was bad news, and I wasn't stupid. So I threw my car in reverse and pulled away. He looks frustrated and disappointed, but I never saw him or the van he was standing at again. I was too stunned to get a license plate, and even if I thought I could report it, I was buying cigarettes and didn't want to get in trouble. I didn't even smoke them. I bought them for the thrill and gave the stale cigs to a stoner friend who did not use them for nicotine. I can still see him in my head though, tapping on the window, It was pretty freaky. I was on the highway too when I realized I'd been so scared I forgot to put on my seatbelt. Alaska is the perfect place to go if you want to get away from the rest of the world. As America's least densely populated state, you have plenty of breathing room from any kind of authority or prying eyes that may want to know what you're up to. For this reason, my home state is very attractive to all sorts of weird and unsavory group. I've stumbled across Scientology centers at the end of a dirt back road with nothing else for miles around, heard stories from doomsday preppers who claim to have bunkers made out of shipping containers in the side of mountains, and met people who have come out of religious cults in the interior that wanted to keep their followers away from any contact with the outside world. All of this and more you can find in Alaska. I was born and raised in Anchorage, the only big city in the state. Growing up, we had about 250,000 people in a city. It takes about 30 minutes tops to drive across, so that gives you an idea for what we up north consider a big city. The only other real city in the state is Fairbanks. These two cities are connected by 360 miles of two-lane highway. It's a 7-hour drive one way to get between them, through one of the most beautiful landscapes on the planet. Mountains rise up on either side of you between Anchorage and Denali National Park before you drive through these colossal canyons, carved out of the rock over tens of thousands of years by melting glaciers and rivers. Past Denali is another 3 hours of driving through a vast, flat interior plain with mountains in the distance. I say all of this to help you understand just how desolate it feels in Alaska, even on the highway. After you get out of Anchorage or Fairbanks, there is nothing but wilderness as far as the eye can see, save for the occasional small town with a max population of about 1,000 people on a good day. 10 years back, it was even less. Alaskan girls are built tough. We change tires, hunt, fish, camp, and generally have a good appreciation for the great outdoors that women in the lower 48 don't really have if they're near a city. The joke is that Anchorage is the biggest royal city in the country. All this brings context to the following story. In high school, things were different, or at least they felt different. I was a young and stupid woman who thought I could conquer anything due to the aforementioned built tough attitude I was raised with. Senior year of high school, I decided to treat myself to a camping trip into the mountains up past Talkeetna. Nothing fancy, just an overnight or two in the most beautiful state at the most beautiful time of the year, mid-June. Going up north in peak summer here has a weird feeling to it. The sun never really sets. If you've ever seen the movie Midsummer, that's what it's like. It gets to be about dusk and that's it. It's still bright and sunny out the whole night through. Shout out to readers in the far north of Scandinavia and Greenland. The false sense of security I had thinking that the midnight sunlight would mean safety probably nearly got me killed, or worse. My second mistake was not telling anyone where I was going. I just packed up for my trip, stopped at Subway for a lunch, and headed out into the great beyond. The drive was fine. A solid 2.5 hours of driving north along the highway took up most of the afternoon as I jammed out to the greatest hits from the radio on Cool 97.3. After you get through the Matsu Valley, you get into the mountains again. Tall spruce and evergreen trees line the road on both sides with the occasional empty space where there has been some clear-out logging. All of this gives you a sense that while you're out in the wilderness, you are still connected to civilization in some way. This led me to my biggest mistake. not staying at a state park campground. I was in high school with only a part-time job and didn't want to pay the $15 overnight camp fee, and was too scared to risk the fine, so I found a spot that looked good and pulled off the road. The map I got from my dad said there was an old mining site up a nearby mountain, so I decided that would be the best spot to head to for an overnight. My logic must have been that it was badass to spend a night in a mining ghost town or something. Pulled off the road, packed up my backpack, put on some bug spray, grabbed my map and compass, and I started off into the woods. Now, this hadn't been the first time I had done this. I've been on wilderness backpacking trips on my own with my dad throughout my childhood. I knew my orientation skills and had taken some wilderness survival courses at camp. I wasn't just some dumb blonde wandering off into the woods with no idea of where I was, or so I thought. A solid 45-minute hike up into the hills, and I finally made it to where the old mining camp was supposed to be. There was nothing there. Just an old concrete foundation with some holes in it and nothing else. I was very disappointed, but surprised at the outcome. I set up camp off in the woods and set to building a fire for dinner on the concrete slab. Here you're supposed to set up cooking a ways off from your camp just in case bears are nosy. Last thing you want is a 1,300-pound grizzly poking his nose in your tent, wondering why you smell like Campbell's soup and s'mores. By this time, it was getting late, about 10 p.m., but the sun was still high in the sky, and by the time dinner was over, it was nearly 11. I was starving and dug in. About an hour later, it was about as dark as it was going to get, so I hunkered down in my tent for the night, confident that the overgrowth was private enough for whatever animals might come out around then. I woke to voices in the distance and slow-moving crashing through the underbrush. I first thought it was hunters. My dad and I had ran into a few on some campouts, so it wasn't uncommon. I relaxed and figured they would just pass through without incident and close my eyes again. That's when they found my fire pit. A man's voice cried out into the brightish forest, "Who the F is camping on our property?" I froze. I knew I had effed up and was getting up, grabbing my purse and putting on my shoes so I could go apologize before I heard the man say again, "When we find you, you're effing dead. You're on private militia property and trespassers get shot." That's when the whole situation changed. I didn't know what to do. I couldn't just pack up my tent and shit with some armed guy lurking around. I carefully put my shoes on, put my keys in my purse, and slunk away into the underbrush as quietly as possible. My thought was to slip away, wait until they got bored and left, then go back, pack up, and leave. I spent 20 minutes hunkered behind a log in the woods, barely in earshot before I heard a second voice calling for the others. They had found my tent and were tearing it apart, going through my stuff. I heard one shout out, "Bed still warm," and "Trespassers a chick, she left her underwear." The first man shouted out, "Okay, fan out and find her. If she thinks she can trespass, then there's gonna be hell to pay." At that point, I wasn't concerned that I had left my spare change of underwear in my bag or that these creeps had found it. I needed to get out of there. Quietly, I made my way down the mountain for a good 30 minutes, tiptoeing and taking care not to step on twigs or make a ruckus. After the rustling and shouting of the men had faded quite a bit, I said F it and booked it as fast as I could in the midnight sun down the hills. I tripped and fell and got scraped up more times than I'd care to remember. Finally, I made it back to the road, but much to my horror, there was no car. I knew I had come out up or down the road from where I had been. I couldn't quite remember where I was at the time, but picked a direction and started walking. I rounded a corner on the road and saw my car and the two men standing beside it. They were armed and dressed in surplus military gear. I hid in the brush on the side of the road and watched. A while later, several more men appeared from the trail I had taken. They dumped all of my stuff next to my car, hopped back on their ATVs, and drove off. I went up to my car, careful not to be seen, and found a note on my dashboard. It read something like, "If we ever catch you on our property again, we won't hesitate to use force. Consider this a warning." I went back to start loading stuff into my car and noticed what they had done. They'd cut up or destroyed all of my gear, probably as punishment for trespassing. Honestly, I'm thankful they did that because I'm grateful I didn't get shot. Ever since then, I have taken great care to camp only in designated camping areas. To the weird Alaskan militia group, I know you weren't actually going to kill me, but nevertheless, let's not ever meet again. Just a quick note. Below is the experience I had 2 days ago. I'm going back to the site right now, so if I disappear, people will have the details. I was in the woods trying to record footage for my channel on YouTube, Doug Shoe Bushcraft. I got some work done, but there were prop planes and helicopters flying overhead. I didn't want a lot of that in the audio, because it can ruin the relaxing atmosphere. So, in the late afternoon, I start hiking back. I made it to a logging road near my truck. There was a beautiful spot by a creek, so I stopped to video record. I heard and felt stomping of something larger than a moose. I didn't see anything stomping. I'm saying that it sounded and felt that way, like when an angry moose stomps. But this was something heavier. But what would be heavier than a moose? It seems impossible for New Hampshire. The camera was acting up. When I got back home and played back the video footage, there was weird static on it. I thought I might have some video footage of the creek. I wasn't sure, but in any case, I was giving up on it. I started walking back to my truck, which wasn't far from there. I heard more stomping. Then I heard crashing. Something apparently breaking branches or saplings. I started video recording, saying something was in there. I heard a helicopter approaching. It flew right over the spot of the stomping or crashing and directly over me. Then I hear a lot of crashing, like something huge running fast right toward me. I started walking backward, then turn and run to my truck. I get into the truck, make a U-turn, and drive away as fast as I thought I could without getting stuck or breaking my truck. I couldn't see anything following me. Playing back the video, I couldn't hear the stomping. That was expected. I also couldn't hear the crashing. I thought I would be able to, but it was some distance away over the lip of a small ridge. I don't know if the audio can be enhanced. I'm going back now. There are marshy and muddy areas there. I'm hoping for footprints. I'll see if there is any other evidence. This didn't feel natural. I don't know how to explain it. I believe there are spiritual creatures that can cause fear and other powerful emotions. I think that's what this was, but we'll see. Here's a quick update. I walked in, and over the lip of the ridge, there were hundreds of saplings that had been knocked down, some old and some new breaks. I found a tree that had been knocked over very recently. I know this because it had pinned down saplings with green leaves. Near that was a quartz crystal boulder dug out of the ground and a smaller quartz crystal rock. There were well-defined trails stomped down. The effect of all those saplings being knocked down made for a very open woods for New Hampshire. In most wild areas, there is a lot of brush. I heard stomping in another area. I walked up on a ridge, continuing in the direction from which I had heard noise 2 days ago. This time, the noise is in the opposite direction, down in a marsh. The trip was cut short by a storm that came out of nowhere. Rain, high winds, and felt like a thunderstorm coming in. I noted trees which looked like they had been hit by lightning. I decided it was too dangerous and headed back. So, I played this game years ago when I was about 14 years old. My best friend, at the time, Melissa, and I decided to play the board. We lit some candles and proceeded to play. We put our fingers lightly on the planchette and asked, "Is there someone there?" It replied, "Yes." We then asked, "What is your name?" It replied, Gina. We then asked, "What do you want?" It started to write CHE, then slowly made its way to L. At this point, I noticed it was starting to spell out my name. From the L, the planchette began to go towards the S. I threw my hands up and started to cry. I 110% trusted Melissa. This girl was my best friend, my ride or die. But I was so scared at this point, I had to ask Melissa, "Did you move it?" She promised me she wasn't moving it. I believed her then, and I still believe her. So after, I called my mom. My mom is super religious. She calmed me down and said a prayer. My mom then said my sister wanted to talk to me. So I get on the phone with my sister. She heard me talking to my mom and wanted to talk to me about her experience playing the game. My sister then began to tell me how she was also contacted by Gina when she played years before me. My sister then asked if I had talked to my oldest sister yet about this. I had not. She told me to call my oldest sister and talk to her about it, so I did. My oldest sister had played this game before both me and my other sister had played. She too was contacted by a little girl named Gina. However, my oldest sister actually stayed and talked to Gina when she had played with this game. My sister then told me how Gina had passed away. Gina had a very similar childhood to my sisters and me. I won't go into detail about hers or our childhood, but it wasn't the best. The fact that my sisters and I all played the game on different occasions, all with different people, and were contacted by the same person, makes me know that this is not just a game. Since that day, I have never and will ever play the Ouija board. I know it is made by Milton Bradley, and they are a game company. However, in my experience, the Ouija board is not a game. It is not something to be played with. If you are reading this and have not touched the Ouija board, don't. Please do yourself a favor and don't. This event happened around the mid-90s. It's a situation I often think back on and realized how lucky I was. I was 18 and I had found a new bar called the Aqua Lounge. It was an interesting place, actually set up in an old Napoleonic fort on the south coast of the UK. I was quite into amphetamines, as were a lot of youths back then, and we would use it to dance all night. One evening there, a DJ that worked there started talking to us. He went by the name of Paul and seemed affable and friendly. He invited myself and 2 other friends back to his for an after party. Initially, we refused as we had started talking to some girls and things were looking promising, but he insisted and suggested they come along too. He gave us a lift in the back of his van and we arrived at his place. I remember seeing lots of UV paintings and his house had a real party house vibe. He offered us drinks and we drank them. Now, being on amphetamine, you're invariably chatty and energetic. However, I felt almost stuck in the chair I was in. The girls we had brought with us said we seemed quiet and boring. I was wide awake, but my body wouldn't move. The girls seemed unaffected by this. Our host kept insisting on giving us drinks, but I refused as the one beer I was given seemed to last ages. Before long, the girls left, and the host started trying to hypnotize us for fun. This didn't work. After a while, in the early hours of the morning, we all left. But the memories of where he lived and the journey home are sketchy for me. A few years later, I was talking to an old friend I had reconnected with, and we discussed the now closed Aqua Lounge and what it was like there. I shared my experience with my friend and said how odd it was. My friend then told me that the DJ Paul was now in prison and that a friend of his had been drugged by him, and when he woke up, Paul was sexually assaulting him in the worst way. I fully believe we were to be his next victims, and if it wasn't for the amphetamine in my system, the drug he used on us would have rendered us unconscious and at his mercy, rather than just locking us to the chairs. I still think back on that night and feel grateful that I wasn't his next victim. In the end, it turns out the club was shut down due to a spat of drugging incidents that occurred there. From 2013 to 2019, I worked in outdoor education at many different summer camps and outdoor education centers in Canada, mostly in Ontario, but I did spend a season in the Rocky Mountains. Having grown up going to sleepaway camp and eventually participating in month-long leadership programs with backcountry counseling components, I was well prepared to lead a group of teen girls from a camp in Georgian Bay on a 2-week camping trip in the Temagami region during my first year as a counselor. The Temagami region is located between North Bay, Sudbury, and Timmins, Ontario. This region is home to many provincial parks, wonderful hiking and canoeing routes, and the Bear Island Indian Reserve. Our route was fairly typical and beginning the Whitefish Falls region, ending at Highway 11 after 14 days of paddling, hiking, and campfire making. We had a satellite phone to check in with our camp director every day, and in case of an emergency, we also had multiple exit points along the route. Until our second to last night, we were having fun and a relatively uneventful time. Besides, some mild dehydration and the unusual bumps and bruises. Near the end of our trip, we were doing some free camping on the shore of an uninhabited island in Bear Lake that is recognized as part of the Bear Island Indian Reserve. It's a beautiful area, and we were across from the main island that the majority of the 250-person population inhabits. We had put out the fire and gone to bed when about an hour after falling asleep, I was jarred awake by the sound of a loud motorboat. Obviously, this isn't that weird because it's a large lake and many people use boats to reach the mainland or their homes on secluded islands. However, it was around 11 p.m., and things had been quiet for the last few hours. The motor could cut out, and I could clearly hear the sounds of an argument. It sounded like at least one man and a woman, and they were very angry and yelling at each other. Although I couldn't hear anything specific because they were too far offshore. Suddenly, the woman screamed, and I heard a splash into the water, and then complete silence. At this point, I was pretty freaked out and hoping to God that my girls hadn't woke up. But I wasn't that lucky because I could immediately hear talking from their tent and can tell they were scared. I was about to unzip my door and look out to see if maybe the boaters had had an accident or something when my whole tent lit up. The light slowly panned across me and onto the tent my girls were in. That immediately made them quiet. In a normal volume, I was able to tell them to stay absolutely still. The light panned back to my tent and then over to theirs again. I can only guess that it must have been some sort of boat with a searchlight on it. If anyone has any idea of what that type of boat could be, please let me know. After an eternity that was really only about 5 minutes, the light was turned off, and I heard the motor engage and fade as the boat drove away from us. I immediately found the satellite phone and called our camp director, who gave us the phone number for the local police. I called them, and they said they would forward the information I gave to the local native detachment on Bear Island. I don't think any of us slept that night, and I got up at 5 a.m. to take my canoe out and take a look around. I thought maybe someone had fallen overboard and had managed to swim to shore. Obviously, I didn't find anyone, and there was nothing floating in the water either, although it is a pretty deep body of water. None of us wanted to camp one more night, so I called the camp and had them head out to the pickup point a day early. We paddled like hell and didn't really talk much. I think none of us really wanted to speculate about what we might have heard, and what would have happened if we'd made noise or moved when that light was on our tents. I thought about this a lot over the years, but whenever I told people the story, they've been quite skeptical. I recently started looking into missing person cases in the area, but without much luck. If anyone reading this is familiar with Indigenous issues in Canada, though, there is an epidemic of missing and murdered Indigenous women, and these cases usually go unreported or unsolved. This past summer, me and my friend were on a spooky kick. You know, scary stories, sleepovers, midnight rituals. Just a bunch of stuff to freak us out. The ending of this kick was, of course, to play with a Ouija board. We bought it, then went over to her friend's house because she was house sitting and it was empty. We arrived, looked up rules, lit candles, and followed everything the internet said to do. At first, we weren't getting anything. We were both wishful thinking, I think, and were subconsciously moving it at first. It was going really slow and not making any sense. So we looked up what to do if nothing was working, and it said to take a break and come back to it. So that's what we did. When we came back, as soon as we did, the board started answering our questions. I am a former self-harmer and have a suicidal past and things like that. The first thing that alarmed me was that it said there were 13 entities in the room with us. I asked how many were bad, and it said 12 out of 13. The second thing was that it spelled out my last name. I kept asking what about it, and finally it answered that they liked me. I asked why, and it said, "You bleed." Which I instantly just knew they were talking about the self-harm, which was terrifying. So, we stopped, said goodbye and everything, and took another break. We came back and I asked it if there was something that I should know. It proceeded to tell me a very huge secret that my friend was keeping from me. She tried to stop, and when she did, it gave me even more details about what happened. We stopped then because neither of us could handle it anymore. We threw the board away in a McDonald's dumpster and tried to not think about it. About 2 weeks later, the board was back and in my friend's mom's back seat. No idea how it got there. My friend knew nothing of how it got there, and her mom didn't even know we did it because we would get in huge trouble. After playing with the board for about 2 weeks after I constantly felt watched and this deep heavy feeling walking around in my house, I heard noises constantly. One time my phone glitched and distorted, and the voice on the other end shut off. A bang went off by my face one night that sounded like someone punching the wall as hard as they could, and hearing voices in the cupboard and opening it to find cups and bowls flipped over, completely on their sides. All this went away though, and I rarely feel things, although sometimes that heavy feeling comes back. The situation happened this winter. I do live in Europe in a place with a lot of mountains. And here, we do not have many people disappearing because this is considered a very safe place. No serial killers and no big predators besides foxes and wolves. It was 3 a.m. and I was working late. When I walked outside and there was an amazing sky, full moon, not cold, and I love stargazing. So without any preparation, I took my dog, put him in the car, drove up 45 minutes into the mountain route, then parked the car and walked another 20 plus minutes up. All this with a sweater and flip-flops and shorts. Moreover, once arrived at the parking spot, I noticed I forgot my phone at home, but I did not turn back. I just left the car and started hiking in the middle of the night. The mood was very relaxed and mellow. My dog was excited of this strange walk, sniffing all around mindlessly, and I was amazed by the sky, totally blown away by the constellations and the moon. It was fantastic. I was just walking, staring at the sky. Until that moment, I felt under a spell. Then something in the small group of trees in my direct line of sight spooked me. I saw a light turning on and off rapidly, like if someone accidentally turned on the phone screen. In that moment, the spell broke, and I have a vivid memory of when I felt cold from the wind. Something I didn't even notice. Then the fear started crawling down my spine, and the adrenaline kicked in. I took my dog, shortened the leash, and rushed back to the car. My brain went into flight mode. I was scanning with my eyes that group of trees while I was jumping down that mountain. I could feel something bad was there. I had no idea what, but I could just feel it. I didn't feel pain in my feet or anything else. I was just rushing my way down. I arrived at my car, opened the driver's side door, and threw my dog into it. I didn't even wait for him to sit down. I jumped in and locked the doors. I pressed start, moved my dog so I could put my seatbelt on, and I was ready to go. But the new Toyota RAV4 won't start immediately. The system needed to boot. In that moment, I had a brief window of time to consider my actions and the situation. I felt secure because I was in my car, and I started to wonder if maybe I was overreacting. And by that time, I went to press the accelerator to go away, and the parking signal on my left side flashed yellow, indicating that there was something getting closer. I instinctively moved my head to the center console and didn't press the accelerator further, while the parking sound started beeping, and the parking camera automatically turned on with 360-degree view. And that is when I see this figure moving toward my car. In total panic, I pressed the accelerator, and thanks to the hybrid system, the EV delivered immediate power, and I was flying out of that parking spot in no time. My partner and I are avid hikers. Last July, we went on a trip and decided to camp at the spot we love just west of Shenandoah. It's quiet, off the beaten path, and offers absolutely spectacular views of both Shenandoah and portions of George Washington National Forest to the west. The first day and evening of our trip itself was nice and uneventful, though we didn't sleep super well because of the humidity. The next morning, we decided to go for a hike in a portion of Jefferson Forest we'd never been to before. It's comprised of ATV trails and about a dozen campsites, but has a trail that leads to an old fire tower we'd always wanted to check out. It was about a 45-minute drive from our campsite, mostly on back roads. When we got there, the first thing that stuck out to us was how empty the campsites were. We actually didn't camp there the night before because we'd heard that the site is usually packed, and we knew we wouldn't arrive early enough in the weekend to get a spot. There were only 2 spots taken, and one was a desiccated tent and a bunch of garbage. It looked like someone had been there for a while, but it was deserted when we arrived. In the other, there was a young woman, I'm guessing in her late teens, setting up a small backpacking tent. There was a truck and one other small car in the parking area. We parked and started getting our gear together, and the woman approached us to ask if we knew where the trailhead was. I told her that we'd read that it branched off about 100 yards into one of the ATV tracks, but we weren't 100% sure which. Since I was getting such weird vibes from the place, I kind of hoped she'd stick around and go with us to find it, but she just thanked us and took off in the general direction of the trail. We set off and walked up and down a few of the ATV trails until we found the walking path. We saw 2 ATVs shoot by us at one point, but otherwise didn't encounter anyone else, including the woman from earlier. It took us about an hour to get to the top of the mountain where the fire tower was. It's an old metal structure, and you have to climb a narrow set of stairs to get to the top of it. We got up, looked around, took some pictures, and started heading down. Honestly, the view was kind of a letdown. About halfway down, very suddenly, everything stopped. The birds, the bugs. It was dead silent. And I don't know quite how to put this into words, but it felt like the ancientness of the forest was contorting and crushing us. I felt trapped and cornered in spite of the expanse around us. My partner and I looked at each other and wordlessly started to book it out of there. We started running back to the car, but the feeling only followed us. As we were rounding one of the switchbacks, we heard this unearthly shriek, like a cross between metal on metal and a choir screaming off key. And we saw something. I just got a glimpse of it before we blacked out. I don't know how to describe it other than it looked huge, despite clearly not taking up much physical space, and moved in writhes and flashes. It didn't have a color. It just felt like evil and emptiness. I probably only perceived it for half a second before my memory just completely gave way. When we came to, we were sitting in the car and 2 hours had passed. double the length of time it took us to get up there. I don't know if we lost consciousness or just somehow blocked those hours out. I learned later the exact same thing happened to my partner. Both of the cars were next to us in the parking lot, and there were still just the 2 tents at the campsite. The woman wasn't in hers, and it looked exactly the same as she'd left it. I think about her all the time and have spent a ton of time trying to figure out if someone went missing around the time of our trip. It took a few months for my partner and I to talk about that day. We still love to hike, but honestly haven't been able to in Appalachian forests since this happened. I'm curious if others have had other experiences like this. Like every good story, there is a beginning and an ending. This roller coaster of a story is still ongoing 2 years later with no end in sight. It all started when I wanted to further my education and get a bachelor's in information systems. To give a little about myself to help paint the picture, I'm 26, 4'8", and female. I get called jailbait often because I look way younger. During the beginning of my studies, my current boyfriend and I had broken up, so I told myself it would be best to stay single until I finished school. I took to the internet after my breakup, as most do, just looking for company. I had found this one group on Facebook where I felt like I belonged. I got along well with everyone, and I loved to flirt in this group. That's where I met him. Let's call him Kemper. Like many others before him, I had latched my claws into him and began flirting. I even had a little crush on him. Things began innocently. I flirted, and he flirted back in the group. He seemed very mysterious, though. I guess that's what drew me to him. He didn't have a profile pic, not of him at least. He never told me his age or what he looked like. After a few weeks of flirting, a woman in the group we were both in had mentioned that it was his birthday. I knew I wanted to do something for him, but I was pretty limited on what I could do. Now, before I get hell for this, just know, I have never sent an unsolicited topless picture to another man. Not until that day at least. On the pic, I wrote happy birthday and pressed the send button on Messenger. Just that split-second decision has changed my life the past 2 years. It's so easy looking back and thinking what you could have done differently, but there is no going back now. Within a week of talking nonstop to Kemper, he was already telling me he loved me. He was working as a truck driver, but at the time he had broken his knee at work, so he was out of commission for a few months, which allowed him to talk to me as much as possible. During this time, I was working as a delivery driver with DoorDash. It was easier for me to make my own schedule since I wasn't done with school just yet. The first few months were great. We would talk constantly over the phone and through Messenger. Also, let me point out quickly that this was a long-distance relationship between Kemper and myself. So, I remember the first fight we ever had. Hell, even before then, I could see the red flags slapping me in the face at every turn. However, our first fight was because I was texting him while driving. He flipped his lid and totally went crazy on me. It was very unexpected, and it made me cry. I can't tell you how many times I tried to apologize and tell him it wouldn't happen again. After the incident, I was blown away how easily something so little or at least I thought it was little, would make him do a complete 180. Months go by and the fights continue more frequently. One point, he had mentioned how cool it would be to have an app where we could see each other's location. In my naive and in-love state, I did some quick research and found an app called Life 360. We both downloaded the app and now he could see everywhere I go. At first, it was a neat idea to say the least, to follow him around everywhere he went to feel closer and more connected to him. That's what I used it for. He, however, wanted to use it for different reasons. I learned over time how controlling, manipulative, and how damn right psychotic he was. We would argue about things, and even when I get mad, he would somehow turn things around on me and made me feel like I was the bad guy. The first time we broke up, it was a complete shit show. He had broken up with me on the group we were both in, just because I had flirted with another guy and he didn't like it. He was telling the other guys in the group how much of a whore I was and how they could have me. He even threatened to give out my address to the guys in the group so they can come to my house and, well, I'm sure you get the idea. My friend, let's call him Aussie for the sake of the story. He was a member of the group, and he could tell how upset I was in the group comments, and he messaged me personally for the first time. Now, let me tell you, I don't know what it is, but seems like I attract monsters. Monster is the best way to describe Kemper and Aussie. They are both well-off men with the world at their fingertips. I guess that's part of the controlling bits or showing aggression when they don't get their way about things. Before I go into more detail about Aussie, I just want to recount a few incidents with Kemper to give the readers a better understanding of what kind of man he is, and how dumb I am letting things continue the way they had. One incident happened months ago. He and I were fighting, seemingly over nothing, and I was driving home from a long day of work and school, and Kemper just blurts out, "I wish you would just run off the road and into a ditch and die." I was speechless. The tears welled up in my eyes, and the driving became harder because I couldn't see, so he almost got his wish. I had to stop at the Dollar General in my town to compose myself. I couldn't breathe. I was wheezing. The man I had thought I loved was wishing I would die. If he hated me that much, why is he keeping me around? I just wanted to curl into a ball at the moment and just disappear for a while. I didn't want to go home, but I couldn't just stay parked at Dollar General. I was really at a loss for what to do. It wasn't until a while later where I told my mom and dad what he said. They were already getting their pitchforks ready, wanting to reenact the Salem witch trials because of him, and ever since then, they haven't liked him. Another incident, he and I were talking about meeting, and he told me that we would need the Menopause Act in place. Yeah, he made that up, but basically, he doesn't want to have sex in the off chance we get pregnant. He told me if I ever did get pregnant, he would make me have a maternity test to see if it's his, and then he would make me abort the child. He doesn't want kids, but I do. So of course I was really upset, and he made me cry yet again. Making me cry is a common occurrence with him over the last 2 years. One night, another fight breaks out, and he loves to drink beer. He loves to hurt me even more by saying beer is his best friend, and beer would never disappoint him like I do. During this late night phone call, he was extremely drunk, and he was threatening to unalive himself. I just couldn't take the arguing. So I bid him a good evening and let that be that, and I hung up on him. I received a large number of texts saying all sorts of things, but one really stood out. He wrote, "If I unalive myself tonight, it'll be because you made me do it." I didn't see these until the next morning, but you can imagine how panicked I was. My heart just sank, and of course tears. He's good at making me feel like crap. Good at manipulating, lying, controlling. It's just all becoming way too much. It's really more than anyone should deal with, no matter how much you love someone. The next day, I begged him to get help for his drinking, his depression, his suicidal behavior, but he just refuses. Being so far away, there's only so much I can do. Kemper has anger issues along with so many other issues as well. I know I'm not perfect, but at least I don't act like he does. I'm very friendly, and I get along with almost everyone. I guess that's part of his problem with me. We are complete opposites when it comes to that. During our time together, I'd gotten 2 other jobs at different times, besides the DoorDash gig, just part-time though. Notice I said had gotten 2 jobs. Well, the first one was at Walgreens. The very first day on the job, I was doing certifications for the job, and during the whole time, he was blowing up my phone, telling me I don't need another job, or telling me that I won't have time for him, or that he would need to find someone else to replace the time I had spent with him, while also keeping me around. I just couldn't take it, so I quit. Fast forward a few months later, I get another job. This one was at Dollar General, just at the town over. I did work there more than a day, but his complaining and nagging ultimately made me quit that job as well. I just recently had a talk with him about graduating soon, and how I will find a job at a hospital working normal hours with better pay. Well, he didn't like that too much. He found some reason to be mad at me and start a fight, and he has gotten in the habit of ignoring me for a day or 2. He's even ignored me for a whole week, and honestly, that was the most peace I had gotten in a long time. Things have just drastically gone downhill, and quick. He tells me all the time now how he doesn't trust me because I wanted to go on a date with a cop. This was some guy I had met at the gas station down from where I lived and gave him my Snapchat. He seemed nice, and I was curious what kind of pics he would post on Snapchat or send me. When the cop sent me a dick pic, that's when he was blocked. And yes, I told Kemper about this. This incident with the cop had happened on one of the many times Kemper and I had broken up. I do respect him, as weird as that is to say. I would never go on another date with another man or flirt with another guy. I'm very friendly, and I guess some guys take that the wrong way. Now, Kemper tells me all the time I need to build trust because the incident with the cop had caused him to have trust issues. I even had a work colleague, yes, a guy, that works at a Mexican restaurant offer free food, and boy do I love me some Mexican food. I see this guy quite frequently and talk to him when I see him because I pick up DoorDash orders from where he works. This guy has asked me out quite often, and I turn him down every time. So, he asked me if I would like free Mexican food and we could just hang out at the restaurant and eat and talk as friends. I guess I really am naive because I learned later this guy had a crush on me. How did I find out he had a crush on me, you ask? Well, I was talking to him one day, maybe about a week after he offered me free food and just to hang, and he began to get extremely close to me, and he kissed me on the lips at the restaurant where customers were sitting around eating. I jerked my head back and told him how inappropriate that was and reminded him that I did in fact have a boyfriend, which he knew from the very beginning. I just don't understand men. I know how bad it seems, and you're probably thinking that Kemper has every right to have trust issues, but I respect him in every way possible. And every time in certain situations like this happens, I handle it the best way I know how. I don't want to make a scene when the waiter at the Mexican restaurant kissed me. I guess I'm too nice for my own good. Now, in each fight Kemper and I have, he always tells me how much of a whore I am, or asks if I do OnlyFans. He even told me the reason why I deleted Life 360, the tracking app, is because I'm going off at night with other men and eating their buttholes. His words, not mine. But no, the reason why I deleted the Life 360 app is because I needed to gain some of the control back and some of my privacy back. As of right now, Kemper and I will have the chance to meet this coming January 2023, although I'm really not sure about it. 2 years of ups and downs and him having my heart and ripping out when it's convenient for him has me thinking it may not be the best idea. Also, it may be the fact that he has told me of his violent past with an ex-girlfriend of his. This happened many years ago, but it scares me knowing he can be this violent. What had happened was, his girlfriend at the time was putting on makeup. He hates makeup. And they got into an altercation with him blacking out and him pinning her down to the bed and choking her. He didn't even realize what he was doing until he came to. He told me lately that if he ever caught me in his bed with another man, he would punch me in the face. Not the guy, simply because the man didn't know better. And I did. I've spent a lot of time and effort in this relationship and wanted it to work out in the end. But honestly, I'm not sure if meeting would be the best thing to do, now or ever. So, let's talk about Aussie. He's a tad bit older than me. He's 49 years old, while Kemper is 48 years old. You would think they would be mature for their age. Well, Aussie is very mature. Kemper, not so much. Aussie and I began talking the first time Kemper and I had broken up. He was being a concerned friend and messaged me asking me what was going on. I spilled everything to him. He was like a best friend I didn't know I had. He was so easy to talk to, and he even began opening up to me about his troubled upbringing. We would talk about everything, and things began to escalate into a more sexual topic. He would tell me about his dark fantasies, which at one point I would have shared with him, but not so much anymore. I'm more vanilla nowadays when it comes to stuff like that. After a month or so of talking, he too would begin to tell me he loved me, but only as a friend. I knew better than that, and it made me uncomfortable knowing that someone I've only had a handful of conversations with, which mostly consisted of sex talk, would tell me he loved me. Majority of the time, he would just exchange GIFs with a few voice clips shared between us. Over time, I felt bad for talking to this man, but he was a comfort when Kemper and I had broken up. But our conversations went from semi-normal just to plain weird. Let me mention real quick, just like Kemper, he too didn't have a profile pic, but he would post pictures of himself on the group, so I knew what he looked like, and he was a very handsome man. After a while of talking to him, he would send me some other pictures which seemed to be newer pictures, which looked nothing like the pictures he had posted in the group. I didn't make a fuss out of it, just assumed the pictures in the group were older pictures. One day he had told me he was getting a haircut. I was trying to be polite and asked for a picture to see the new haircut. Days later, he finally sent me that picture. I wasn't sure who this person in the picture was. It looked absolutely nothing like the previous pictures he had sent. At that moment, I assumed I was being catfished. but it didn't matter to me because looks really don't matter. A lot of messages I receive from him is how he wants to breed me. He refers to himself as Mr. Wolf and tells me all the time how he wants to marry me and steal me away from Kemper and get me pregnant. He talks all the time about how we would make a beautiful child and how he's very well off, so he would be able to have more children and how much of a great life we would have. He even goes out of his way to find gifts and pictures of naked pregnant women being forced into brutal things. Things tend to get even darker at times. He has told me that he wants to have his way with me in front of Kemper while he's tied to a chair, and then have his way with Kemper next. One time, he was talking about some women in the Facebook group we were in, and just women in general, who would cheat on their husband and flirt with other men behind their husband's back. He would say how these women need to be taken care of. Not the exact word he used, but I hope you get where I'm going with that. He tells me all the time how he knows high-end people, how he's good friends with the governor, and that he can find any kind of information about someone if he needs to. It's truly scary, to say the least, if this is all true. And my gut feeling is telling me that it is. Just one of the many reasons I began distancing myself from him. He's in the process of having a lawsuit settled, in which he would gain a large amount of money from it, which he really doesn't need. One day, he began sending me pictures of this piece of property with a large multi-million-dollar home on it with a cellar. He would tell me how he could convert the cellar into a dungeon and keep me there as his play toy. The more I write about things, the more I'm getting a better idea of how dangerous things can possibly be if I ever met either Kemper or Aussie. Aussie tells me all the time about his lawsuit and when it should be finished, and tells me he would love to take my mom and myself to dinner. I talk about my mom quite often to him because she plays a big part in my life, and I love her more than anything. So, I live in the South by the Gulf, and Aussie has friends over in this area. He wants to meet a few of his Facebook friends that live in this area and had asked me to join him for a few weeks of traveling to meet some of his friends with him. That is, after his lawsuit is settled. That's a big nope from me. I barely even know him, much less his Facebook friends. So, this is my story so far. Not sure how things will turn out, but as of right now, let's not meet. Kemper and Aussie both scare me in ways I can't explain. I do love Kemper with all my heart, but he has a lot of issues he needs to work on before I even consider meeting him, so it may never happen. I'm really hoping once I get a job working at a hospital that I will be able to find someone normal to date and spend the rest of my life with. Kemper tells me sometimes I need to move on because he'll never change, and I'm beginning to believe it. At the moment, I feel like things with Kemper will never go any further than how they are. It's hard, though, to get away from them, especially Kemper. He knows my address, phone number, email addresses. He can even make multiple Facebook accounts to send me messages. Even one time I had blocked Kemper on everything, he found a way to send me a message from an unknown number asking me to unblock him so we can talk. I have other stories I can tell you about men I never want to meet again, but this story is the one that has the most effect on my mental health. And now, I hope I never meet another man like Kemper or Aussie. When I was about 15, my friend was talking about a Ouija board and saying how it worked. I'll call her friend 1. I didn't think that crap like that existed. I heard stories and stuff, but I wasn't fully convinced. Even though my whole life I was told not to mess with one by my religious family members. I didn't believe and I was curious, so I suggested that we try one. One night, it ended up happening. I was with friend 1 and friend 2. I was so nervous that it could actually work. It was around 2 in the morning. We were in my dining room, which was basically just an extra room we didn't use. We had a dim light that dangled above the table. All 3 of us put our fingers on it and asked if anyone was there. It slowly started to move towards yes. Friend 2 took her finger off because she was scared, which kind of made me scared since she broke the rules. But I also thought it was all just a bunch of BS. We all asked each other, "Did you move it?" All of us said no. I felt chills go down my spine. We put our fingers on and kept playing. We asked it its name, and it said that it was friend 1's dead mom. We all looked at each other. We asked how old it was, and it said the age of my friend's mom would be. We figured it was just a spirit pretending to be her mom, because that's what they do when they want to get out, right? Then we just kept asking it questions that it wouldn't know, like how tall is this person? What color is this person's hair? How old is this person? It got every single one right. We started to get really freaked out, so we stopped. We said goodbye, but I'm not sure if it did. Every now and then, my 3 friends would play it. It was never all 4 of us. Just me and 2 other friends, but they would alternate. It said some other really weird things. One time we were talking to a spirit and we asked what its name was, and it was just a bunch of jumbled letters. I don't know what that means. Anyway, after a while, we stopped doing it. But after we did, weird stuff started happening at my house, like in the kitchen, which is right by the dining room. You would be in the fridge or something and you could hear freshly washed silverware clinking together, even though no one was in there. Then me and a friend were trying to go to sleep. It was around 3 a.m. It was dead silent then. We could hear loud noise. We looked at each other because we can't distinguish what it is. It sounded like something dragging. Then it clicked. I knew exactly what it was. It was the dining room table. I knew because I moved it before, so I knew the sound it made. It was very distinct. It was a wooden table on tile floor, so it made this really loud, bumpy sound. Anyway, no one was in there when it happened. My mom was on the opposite side of the house. Our dogs were with us, so the only thing it could have been was a cat. And I don't think a cat can move this table. It really was hard to move. And that happened not once, but twice. So yeah, that really freaked me out. I started to feel like I was being watched. I know one of my friends felt the same way. I woke up once to someone whispering my name in the middle of the night. I thought it was my mom trying to wake me, so I went to her room. But she was sleeping, so I woke her up and asked if she was trying to wake me up. And she said, no. I had her walk me back to my room so I could turn on the lights because I was so scared. I don't know. It was just a crazy experience. Has anyone else experienced something this strange and unusual? And that, dear listeners, is the end of this special read just for you. Thank you so much for getting back to ashes over 1K, and thank you so much for your support. I hope you are resting and sleeping well. Until next time, I'll read to you later. Good night.